Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
with your host, the seer of the beer, Chris Powell.
And Laura Vosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month, we invite a guest author to read their works and talk about writing while sipping a beer specially paired to their work.
Today's guest is Robert Gereb.
So sit back
Pop a cold one
and dive into some books.
and brews. Welcome to Books and Brews, episode number 77 with Robert Gereb, if I didn't totally butcher your name. And we're very happy to have him here today. Laura, what have you been reading or doing this past month?
I have been reading, that doesn't want to show, Jack the Ripper's Assassins, our guest book. I've also been reading, I can't read the title this way, History of the Church in the Middle Ages. That's better. And that is because my own books are set in medieval times. And so I just started a Substack in addition to my blog, which frankly, they'll probably have a lot of the same material because there's only one of me. And because my books are set in medieval times, I'm going to do a series on the church since it was pretty much the most powerful force in politics and culture and life and everything. So I think you've had some time on a plane. You've got some reading in.
Yes, I read a couple of books by an author on Amazon named Jack Slater. They're kind of what you might call national security thrillers. And since I kind of work in some of that kind of an area, they're a lot of fun to read. I've also been reading a fascinating book.
But don't tell our audience that you're a spy. We're supposed to be keeping that secret. I just want to remind you.
Well, yeah, you sort of, blew my cover, right? Yes.
He's not
I have
a
no
spy.
cover,
I
right?
swear he's not a spy.
And then I've also been reading a fascinating book about President Andrew Jackson, who was elected in the early 1820s. And this is actually a book that collects together his speeches and covers the rhetoric of what he was covering at that time as a very interesting president. And what I find fascinating about it is he was our first populist president here in the US, and so very much kind of synchronizes with a lot of things you hear coming from President Trump and his staff these days. So it kind of sets some very interesting historical context from 200 years ago. So yes, and what else do we have going on?
It has been another interesting, exciting month here. We had predators in our chicken coop for the first time. It's more of a very small barn than a coop. And we've been really lucky. What have we had chickens about 3 years, I think?
Yes.
And we have never had a predator, but we had something getting in and gutting these poor chickens, doing one every night. And then the third one got its head kind of torn off. And so Terry, our farmhand, and I spent probably the better part of a day sealing up any possible little place inside and outside, and put out live bait traps. We have caught, I think, 2 possums, 2 raccoons, and I think we've got our 5th skunk out there. So, and we think that darn skunk was stealing our eggs too.
Yes.
So that led to the story of the chicken who would not die because one of these poor chickens got her back scratched up, and she wasn't injured that badly by the predator, but then the other chickens, they like blood. Who would think that chickens are bloodthirsty? Speaking of the book we're about to talk about,
Yeah. We bring this topic up.
we have some nasty, vicious little Jack the Ripper chickens out there.
Yes.
And they were pecking this poor little girl to death. And so we brought her up to the garage where we could protect her. After 5 days, it wasn't getting better. And we realized she's pecking herself. She's Jack the Rippering herself, the stupid chicken. So
They're
I
not
thought,
the smartest animals in the world.
so despite all the medications and things I was putting on her, so I put her outside, thought, enjoy your last time on earth in the free and the wild. And this chicken just refused to die. She just, like 6 days later, she's still marching around. And amazingly, the wounds seemed to finally be getting better. So we kept feeding her outside. And then we tried to take her to a friend's chicken coop where there were no other chickens. We put her in the back of the UTV in her cage. We drove down the road, down into the hollers, and got to the back of the UTV, and there's no chicken there. So somehow the latch wiggled open while we were driving, and we actually found her fairly close to home, just living her best life out there in the woods just beyond our land. And but we couldn't get her back. So I don't know if she's still out there, but it's kind of sparked a whole new series of books about this chicken and all her adventures.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb again and probably gather that our author this month is very interesting, and perhaps you could introduce him and let us know how interesting.
So we are welcoming Robert Gereb, and that is supposed to be said with a rolled R, but I would feel like I would feel stupid trying to use an accent that isn't mine. So Robert Gereb is a boundary-pushing author and accomplished AI developer. I've had lots of interesting conversations with other authors about AI. They love it or they hate it. There's no in between. I bet. As co-author of Jack the Ripper's Assassins, the cornerstone of the Dighton Chronicles, built on multi-generational oral history from a Romani-Viking lineage. He melds immersive storytelling with rigorous historical research. He also penned 2 nonfiction guides through Aspect Books, Easy Millionaire Math, we all like the sound of that, a practical blueprint for building scalable passive income businesses, and Declutter Your Life, Enrich Your Soul, an emotionally holistic program for simplifying your surroundings, finances, and relationships for deeper personal growth. Chris,
Very nice.
what do you think about decluttering our lives?
It's not what we do. We clutter them and we clutter them again.
Yeah, we have a lot of interests. So we've got probably about 80 musical instruments in the house, including 2 grand pianos and 2 harps, one of which is quite large.
And 5,000 books, which are not in the background of this image. They're actually in a library. So yes.
Okay.
So we have some stained glass making equipment. We've got some leather tanning equipment.
But more importantly, we have an interesting author to talk to.
We do. So welcome. And what is our first drink?
Yes.
Well, thank you for having me, Laura and Chris. Sorry, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be in your show. And I'm really happy that you invited. So I hope it will be interesting. What I can tell you about the book.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I did some digging into the history behind it, and it's fascinating. Before I forget, just before we started, you were about to tell me an interesting story, I think, about how you ended up in Transylvania.
Oh, I'm actually in a Transylvanian guy, native Transylvanian, and here Transylvania is known usually about Dracula, who was actually a historical figure, Vlad Dracul, which was an emperor here, a Romanian emperor. But here, mostly in Transylvania, we live Hungarians. So I'm a native Hungarian from Transylvania. Transylvania once was part of Hungary. So it's a little bit of a mixed historical background. So it's a really interesting thing. So, and then I met my partner and I moved to England 1.5 years ago, but I came home a few weeks ago because I had a lot of things to do at home too. So that's my short story.
Short story. I do have the agent for an author who wrote, I think it's a prequel. I forget if it's a prequel or sequel. Actually worked with Bram Stoker's descendants. And so hopefully we'll get him on. But I'm still working on setting that up, and that will be neat if we can do that. I was hoping for October, but it didn't happen. So anyway, go ahead with drink number 1.
Well, I was excited by this topic because I was able to put together a number of drink recipes, which I think will very much set the mood for our readings here today. And the first one I have is the Ripper's Fog. This is a very interesting drink. It's a smoky and mysterious cocktail that captures the atmosphere of gaslit London streets and the creeping dread of an unseen predator. This drink is smoky, dark, and unsettling, like a whisper in the fog. And it first starts out with some ice in a shaker. And I'm going to put a couple ounces of London dry gin, because of course, every drink set in Jack the Ripper's time should have something to do with London dry gin. Then we're going to put in about a half ounce of mezcal. Now, mezcal, many people think that just might be regular tequila, but tequila and mezcal are two different things. And mezcal is actually roasted in underground pits from a number of different potential agave sources. So it has that really neat smoky type flavor that tequila itself doesn't have. So that's what's gonna give us our wonderful backdrop of a nice smoky scene in gaslit London. And then we have about 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice. When we have a dry gin and things like that, a little bit of lemon or lime can really help a gin drink be a little less bitter. And on top of that too, I have some wonderful honey syrup. This is a 1-to-1 concoction and of honey and water. And that's going to give it, I think, a really, really neat flavor. And I shake this up, make sure everything is well chilled. And then I have a chilled coupe glass, which is kind of a small bowl-shaped glass. And what I do with this is I put some absinthe in it. Now we're really talking Victorian times. And I take some of the absinthe and I rinse it in the glass. And that makes sure that we're not using too much of an absinthe flavor, which has a very, very distinct flavor in it. We just want the hint of that. And once I put the absinthe in there, I can then pour the drink.
So the absinthe was actually poured out. It just
Yes, I
kind
just
of
rinsed
lines the glass.
the glass. It has a flavor that can be described as a bit like licorice or ouzo or something like that. And we don't want to have necessarily too much of that. And then the last thing I do is express a bit of lemon peel over it. So we're getting a little bit of the lemon oil. And I drop that right in the drink.
So you can kind of see the lemon peel is in there.
And here we have the Ripper's Fog to set the stage for our first reading.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It's my 14th birthday, by the way, today. So
Happy
Birthday.
birthday. Mine is
Yeah.
Still toast your birthday today.
Yes, happy birthday.
Thank
Mine
you
is
very
in
much.
4 days. Yeah, 4 days. So we have some exciting things planned. We're going to go see a trombone shorty, jazz trombone player. So
What did you think of that
congrats.
drink?
what did I think this is wonderful. This may take first place over the coal miner's daughter.
Very nice.
And it's funny because it has flavors that I don't think I would generally like, but for some reason I really like
They all
this.
fit together well.
Mm-hmm. So, Robert, I think your English is absolutely wonderful.
Thank
way
you very
better
much.
than my Hungarian, which is non-existent.
Which is abysmal. Right. Yeah, mine too.
But so I think you would have done great reading these, but I understand if someone asked me to read in German, I might be very uncomfortable doing that. So this is the first selection, and here we are meeting the central villain for the first time. The dogs, mostly black Labradors and liver-colored spaniels, whined with anticipation, their breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. They were beautifully trained, sitting at their handlers' heels, despite their evident excitement, their eyes fixed on the direction of the first drive. One young spaniel, perhaps on his first season, trembled with barely suppressed energy, earning a quiet word from his handler. Andrew, who is the main hero, found himself positioned between a portly earl who wheezed with every step and young Prince Albert Victor, who hummed tunelessly under his breath, a melody that seemed to have no beginning or end, only a disturbing continuous loop. The sound was just at the edge of hearing, like the buzz of an insect that couldn't be located, setting Andrew's teeth on edge. The line of guns stretched across the landscape, each man at his numbered peg, marked by a stake driven into the frozen ground. The positioning was crucial. Too close together, and there was danger of accident. Too far apart, and birds might slip through the line unscathed. Andrew's position, number 7 of 9, placed him at a crucial point where the terrain funneled birds toward a gap in the trees. I don't believe we've been introduced, the prince said, turning those unsettling eyes on Andrew. This close, Andrew could see that the prince's pupils were unnaturally dilated despite the bright morning light.
Pardon me. Take a small break there.
I'll edit this out.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, I'm edit.
There was a faint tremor in his hands, barely perceptible, and a sheen of perspiration on his upper lip despite the cold. The signs were familiar to Andrew from his time in London's less salubrious establishments. That's a great word. The prince was under the influence of some substance, laudanum, perhaps, or something more exotic. You're Marlborough's discovery, aren't you? The man with the beautiful wife. Andrew fought to keep his expression neutral. There was something in the way the prince said beautiful, a lingering, tasting quality that made his skin crawl. Lord Pemberton, your Royal Highness, Andrew replied carefully, noting how the prince stood just a fraction too close, invading the invisible boundaries of proper social distance. The scent of his cologne was overwhelming this close, something heavy and oriental with undertones of decay like flowers left too long in a sick room. And yes, I am fortunate in my marriage. Fortunate indeed. The prince's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too white. They put Andrew in mind of a predator's fangs designed for tearing rather than chewing. I caught a glimpse of Lady Pemberton at breakfast. Such lovely blonde hair. It reminds me of someone. But then, beautiful women often remind me of other beautiful women. A weakness of mine, I'm afraid. He paused, tilting his head like a bird of prey, examining potential query. The movement was unnaturally smooth, as if his neck were on a swivel. You know, Lord Pemberton, I never forget a face. It's both a gift and a curse. Sometimes I see someone, and years later, the memory crystallizes, perfect in every detail. Most unsettling for the person in question when I reveal where we truly met.
Very nice. And I have to say, with absinthe in this drink, that the one word you would use to describe an absinthe cafe at the turn of the 20th century from the 19th was salubrious.
Okay.
I have to write a book just for the sole purpose of using the word salubrious. I'll add that to my to-do list. It is.
I was wondering if you happen to have heard of a book from an author named Elizabeth Kostova, and the book is called The Historian. And it's actually about Vlad the Impaler and through history as someone who had kind of a very, you could call it an overly long history, but he was a historian. And I learned a tremendous amount about Romania and you know, Transylvania about that book. It was very nicely written. So I was just curious if you happen to have heard of it.
No, never. You know, we learned all of these things and at history lessons because it was part of our school lessons and everything. So that's why. And then I met, of course, Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was amazing. But of course, it's not related to the reality, except for the main character really was Transylvanian. Of course, but he was an insane emperor. That was the only thing. He was really cruel, really cruel. That's why Bram Stoker made him Dracula.
I find, I don't want to get off topic, but I do find the stories of vampires fascinating because in my research for my books, I came across the story of the vampire of Melrose Abbey. This was written in what was meant to be a history book. It was not a work of fiction. I mean, supposedly, it's kind of an accepted primary source for researching those times. And four priests talk about this, Der Hund priest, the dog priest, rising from his grave and still tormenting people after his death. So to me, that's a fascinating question. I don't want to believe this is true. And yet these stories are everywhere, you know, all over the world, all cultures throughout history. So, but we're talking about, you know, other killers. This is presented as a true story, and you worked with the descendant of the people depicted in this book. How did you get involved in this?
Well, I met a guy who was the first chronicle of this book, named Jerry Sherrard, and his friend is actually Keith Dighton, who is now the head of that whole Romani family. And just because they knew that I already wrote some books, actually they asked me to write this final book for them based on their stories. So that's how I met them, actually, and we became really, really good friends with Keith and his family. They are really lovely people with a really big heritage and a very long family history, and it's
Okay.
quite amazing.
And it's a fascinating history. And like I said before we started, I do generally go research the topic, the author. You know, I look at your website, find out, you know, what interesting things you might want to talk about, that sort of thing. Who is Rohan Dighton? His name is on the spine.
Yeah, very good question. Thank you. Well, actually, my problem was that Jerry Sherrard made the primer research for the book. Keith Dighton is the owner of the whole heritage and everything, and also the copy author of the book. And I was the one who actually made it as a novel, and that's why I didn't want it to confuse people. So we chose this Romani named pen name for three of us. So this is a pen name. This is a fictional author. Yeah, this is a fictional author, which is the storyteller of the whole trilogy, actually.
Okay.
And yeah.
And what does the first book focus on? I think it goes back to is it 1066?
Yeah, exactly. To the Battle of Hastings, where they are actually they are mentioned in the Hastings tapestries, if you know that. It's a very famous tapestry, and the Dighton family.
What is the tapestry called?
Hastings tapestry.
Okay. Yeah, I think I have heard of that. I'm more familiar with the Bayeux tapestry, but I'm positive I've heard of the Hastings one too.
Ah, yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, they have a really rich family history, an amazing family history, and of course, there will be. This is a trilogy, actually. The first part is from 1066, from the Hastings battle to the Jack the Ripper story. And then the Jack the Ripper story is the book, actually, which appeared. I used to make jokes that we are publishing these books like the Star Wars was published. You know, we published with the middle story, and then the first one, and then the third one. So this is, and they are already under verification by Amazon, so they will appear soon, the first and the third book too.
So the trilogy isn't really about Jack the Ripper or about Andrew and Caroline, it's about the Dighton family.
Exactly. It's the whole chronicle, the true story, the whole chronicle of the Dighton family, written in a romantic novel style. That was a goal, because they wanted to tell these stories to the world, but I said that, look, if you just write it down as a, I don't know what it's, if you just write it down, it will be too dry, it's like a catalog. It's not okay. So let's make a proper research. And I made loads of researches about fact-checking, historical data. I researched the 19th century English traditions, culture, everything, economical, and every kind of aspect of that century. And of course, the dialogues and everything is fictional, but the spine of the whole story is absolutely true. It's based on their stories. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have I have big questions about that. I'm curious, what did you know about Jack the Ripper before you started this project?
I knew that no one knows who he was. That was one thing, and nothing more. You know, I've seen some movies which mention Jack the Ripper or about Jack the Ripper, but nothing more. But during these whole interviewing sessions and the fact checking and meeting the family and so I got to know more and more. And it absolutely made sense. As they told me the story, it absolutely made sense that this is the true story, and that guy is really Jack the Ripper. And then I found out why could they hide their identity until now. So it absolutely made sense. And really interestingly, when I advertise this book, many people are coming to me. You are the 10th or the 100th author who says that you know the truth and blah blah blah, but this cannot be true. We will never know. But if you read the book, it absolutely makes sense, and there's a whole research behind the book. So it's amazing, I think.
It's a fascinating subject, and I have more to say on that later, but I think we need to do drink number 2
Drink
already.
number 2.
The time flies.
All right.
Here's I think this is going to be another interesting cocktail. This is called Mary's Last Night. So this is a tribute to Mary Jane Kelly, the Ripper's final canonical victim. This cocktail is bittersweet, it's floral, and hauntingly beautiful. A drink that tastes like a tragic lullaby, sweet, delicate, and gone too soon, like Mary herself. So this starts off again. We'll put some ice in a shaker. I've also already chilled some martini glasses for this cocktail when we bring it together.
I just want to know how you found room in the fridge to fill those.
I actually used an ice bowl.
Oh, okay.
As Jack the Ripper may have chilled his knives before he used them.
Right.
Who knows, right? And so we're going to start off with some blood orange juice, of course. We're going to have about 1.5 ounces of blood orange juice. If you ever had this, it's kind of a zippier version of orange juice. It's got kind of a lemon, almost a sour aspect to it, but it's still got the body of orange juice. So it's
That looks an awful lot like V8, and I am not looking forward to drinking this. I still have nightmares about the time my father made me drink like a 16-ounce glass.
This has nothing to do with the taste of V8 juice.
So.
The next thing that we're going to have is 1 ounce of Lillet Blanc. But since we don't really have access to Lillet Blanc here in Eastern Tennessee, I'm going to substitute a kind of a good analog for it, which is actually dry vermouth with just a touch of orange bitter. So we'll throw that together. Now we're going to add 1 ounce of vodka to the mix. And then, again, keeping it kind of floral, we're going to use just a bit of creme de violette. But since it's also hard to find creme de violette in Eastern Tennessee, we're actually going to use some lavender syrup. And so we'll just use this a bit sparingly because it is very floral, but it's also got a nice little bit of sweetness to it. So again, between the Lillet Blanc and the creme de violette, we're getting this wonderful floral aspect of, which could have been the backdrop to Mary Kelly's personality. Then we're throwing in just a bit of orange bitters. When we're done with that, we're going to shake this all up. And if we were able to find them, we would have actually served this with an edible flower or rose petal.
Lavender.
We do have that, but the edible flower or rose petal would actually kind of speak to Mary's memory as well. But in this case, we're pouring this very beautiful looking beverage into a martini glass. And again, it has nothing to do with V8.
I hope that you are right. This is, what is it called?
This is
Last Night.
Last.
So
A
cheers.
tragic lullaby.
That's actually much better than I was dreading and fearing. I mean, Mary's Last Night was pretty awful, and maybe that was what they decided to be.
Right, yeah.
A really horrible drink. Just like the last night. I shouldn't laugh about that. It's really a horrible story.
But now we're ready for reading number 2. All righty. From The Prince's Secret. Caroline Dighton sat before her dressing table, her fingers trembling as she unfastened the pearl necklace Andrew had given her for their 10th anniversary. The three-strand choker, its lustrous orbs catching the amber glow of the gas lamps, felt suddenly heavy against her throat, as though the memories it had witnessed were weighing it down. In the mirror's reflection, an oval of silvered glass framed in ornate brass, she could see her husband pacing behind her, his large frame casting shifting shadows in the lamplight. The Persian rug beneath his feet, one of their legitimate purchases, not a prop for their schemes, muffled his footsteps, but she could feel the vibration of his restless energy through the floorboards. The revelations from Whitechapel had awakened memories she had buried deep, memories that now clawed their way to the surface like corpses from shallow graves. The evening newspaper lay folded on her dressing table, its headlines screaming of another disappearance in the East End. But it was not the printed words that haunted her. It was the knowledge of what those words concealed. "Tell me," Andrew said quietly, ceasing his restless movement. His reflection appeared beside hers in the mirror, his weathered face marked by years of fights, both in and out of the ring. "Tell me everything about your time at Highgrove, every detail about the prince." Caroline closed her eyes, and suddenly she was 16 again, lying on a narrow cot in the servants' quarters, her body a landscape of bruises from her fall. The coarse linen sheets scratched against her skin, and the smell of carbolic soap and camphor filled her nostrils. She could hear the distant sounds of the great house, the clatter of pans from the kitchens below, the murmur of voices from the family quarters above, the tick of the long case clock in the servants' hall, marking the passage of her convalescence. "It was March of 1854, she began, her voice distant. The date rolled off her tongue like a prayer or a curse. The spring had come early that year, and the grounds at Highgrove were already beginning to bloom. Crocuses pushed through the last patches of snow, and the air had that particular quality of English spring, cold and warm at once, promising and threatening in equal measure. She paused, reaching for the crystal decanter of laudanum laced wine that sat on her dressing table. Her doctor had prescribed it for her nerves, though she rarely indulged. Tonight, she needed its courage. "I had been following the hunt on foot. Foolish, but I was young and wanted to see the spectacle. The master of foxhounds had been particularly proud of his pack that season. 30 couples of the finest hounds in England, he boasted. Their voices in full cry could make your blood sing, even if you were just a maid who cleaned fireplaces and emptied chamber pots." Andrew moved to pour himself a measure of whiskey from the sideboard, the amber liquid catching the light like liquid gold. "You never told me you worked at Highgrove before coming to Rye." "There are many things we haven't told each other about our pasts, my love." Caroline's smile was rueful. "We both came to our marriage with secrets. But this one I buried because I thought it would never matter again." She sipped her wine, feeling the laudanum's gentle warmth spread throughout her chest. "A fox broke cover near me, and the lead horse, Prince Albert's mount, a magnificent bay hunter called Perseverance, shied and threw his royal highness. In the chaos that followed, I was trampled. 3 horses at least. I remember the first hoof catching me in the ribs, the explosion of pain, then nothing but darkness and the taste of mud and blood."
This reading really resonated me because, in fact, I have been trampled by a
Indeed,
horse.
she had. Yes.
And
And a ram, and
a
bunnies,
ram.
and chickens.
Well, no, the bunnies only scratched me and the chickens only peck me. Yeah, when I was, and I think I was about the same age, I think 15 or 16. I have to try and remember the summer. we were on a band trip to Mackinac Island, and it's a long story why the horse that was supposedly a well-trained horse, it was trained to follow all the other horses. And the couple in front of me, the woman was terrified of horses, begging to go back. So they finally, her husband let her go back. Mine tried to follow, and because Mackinac Island is all cobblestones, its hooves slipped on the cobblestones. And while I was sitting on the back of this horse that was literally sitting on the pavement, trying to decide, do I jump before it rolls over on me, or do I, what do I do? I fell off. And so my legs did get pretty shredded, both of them from knee to ankle. And I was actually very disappointed that I got literally a horseshoe-shaped scar on my right leg. You could even see the cross hatching in the scar from the horseshoe. And I was really disappointed when it faded 2 years later and I don't have it anymore, because I thought that is the ultimate irony, since horseshoes are lucky and getting trampled by horses unlucky. I thought this is the greatest scar in the whole history of mankind. And then it faded on me. I should get one tattooed there.
I think it's a good plan.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like your comment somewhere in this book, because I ended up skimming maybe the last 20 pages last night. Other than that, I was able to read almost all of it quite thoroughly. You say some stories are too strange to be anything but true. Now, as I started researching more about Jack the Ripper and Prince Albert Victor, I'm told Prince Albert Victor, and I was told this by AI. So as I've discussed on other programs, AI is not a crystal ball. You can't trust it 100%, but they gave a very detailed list of proving or showing that he was, at least supposedly, at very specific places documented at the time of each of these murders. So they said he couldn't possibly have committed these murders. And you do address the historical accuracy of this in the back of the book. Could you kind of tell our audience a bit about that?
Yeah, so of course, in the memory of the family, some dates and some years were different from the historical books, because of course we are talking about many generations who told these stories to the next generations. So yeah, I made a massive historical fact checking actually, and at the end of the book, of course, I'm telling the differences on the story. So I'm letting to the reader to decide how these tiny little mistakes could happen in the timeline, So actually, I think the family, for example, that Keith's grandfather, called Henry Dighton, on the nickname Togo. Actually, he was officially, when he died, he was 78 years old, but he was 86 years old, because his papers were mistaken or whatever. So you have to know that these traveler families have a really free life, as their motto says, fortune favors the free. And sometimes these official papers and these kind of things they just lose it, they just get new ones. So these kind of things are hard to track back, and that's why I think that's why these historical things are happening, but only a few years. So it's not changing the facts, actually, the main fact that who was Jack the Ripper, what have they done, how the royal family tried to pursue them, and these kind of things. So these were actually all true.
Okay. I was really glad you put that note at the end, because as I was reading through it, and then going and looking into various things, I was thinking, well, wait a second, is this really a true story, or are you claiming it's a true story for sales or whatever, and so then when I got to the end and I saw that, it made sense where I could say, okay, this is the family's story, and you're not making it up. I was curious, have you seen this notebook that was given to Keith Dighton at the beginning of the book?
No, I haven't. So actually, the notebook was many pictures were given to him about the family stories, and the notebook is actually so the notebook is an interesting thing because there existed a notebook. It doesn't exist now, but a new notebook was made by him based on the Henry Togo's stories.
So I was curious, and I'm curious if you have an answer to this, that Prince Albert Victor, I keep having to think about the order of those two names, was apparently a very vicious person, according to this family's story, from the time he was very young. Do they have any explanation why, when Caroline confronted him twice about his viciousness to first the other maid and then to a bird, do they have any explanation why he didn't just vent his anger on her and, beat her to a pulp or kill her then and there?
Well, you never know. Actually, he was mentally ill.
Okay.
You have to know that the royal family actually made him disappear.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. After the Dightons told the royal family that, look, we know who's Jack the Ripper, and they try to, of course, ask some money for them to stay silent and everything. They made the whole English police guard chasing them, because there are some other side stories, by the way, which explains how they could do that. And then they made Prince Albert Victor disappear in an asylum, which wasn't the original story. The original story was that he was kind of an illy person, and he wasn't really showing up to the world. It wasn't true. He was in an asylum, and he died in an asylum. So that's the explanation.
Very interesting.
Could he be considered psychopathic then?
Absolutely.
Like yes,
yeah,
right.
100%. Yeah. And I definitely do want to get to some questions about the murders in the Apostles Club, but I think we need to do drink number 3.
Yes, that sounds wonderful.
I'm hoping that we will have an after hours to discuss more of this, because there are way too many questions for just an hour.
Okay.
So the third drink that I have is called the Autumn Ripper. And I thought, on the occasion of autumn and fall coming here, actually it should be in the next day or so. This is a brooding, complex cocktail that's perfect for a foggy Victorian night. And so what we're going to do is, this is actually going to be a bit more of a stirred cocktail versus a shaken cocktail. And we're going to start
James Bond, huh?
Indeed, very much so. And we're going to start with 1.5 ounces of good rye whiskey. And of course, here in Tennessee and Kentucky, especially with me as a Kentucky colonel, I'm not going to give you just a, off-the-shelf version of a rye whiskey. I'm going to give you a very good rye whiskey to act as the basis of this cocktail. So I happen to have some Wilderness Trail here, bourbon rye whiskey for that. Now, and Laura's going to find this very interesting, the next thing that I put into this drink is actually tawny port. We are big fans of tawny port. So
Nathan, if you're listening, do you have tawny port for us yet?
Right. He is a local waiter that, he had to leave the restaurant that he used to work at because he couldn't provide us port. But
that's our take on the story anyway.
Yes, of course. Tawny port is an interesting wine that's made in Portugal, and it's what's called a fortified wine, in that they take regular wine and then they terminate the fermentation with sugar. And so it causes a very kind of heavily sweet flavor. And in Victorian England, it would have been known as claret. And so, claret would have been, very much known by the folks in the Victorian era that we're talking about here. And then we just put in a little bit of lemon juice to kind of take the edge off of things. And then, of course, coming at it from a very British and Victorian sense, we put in just a little bit of Angostura bitters. And now I take an orange twist and kind of express it into the drink to get that orange oil, and we throw that in there as well. And then I'll put just a couple of ice cubes to chill it and stir it up just a little bit. And now we have the Autumn Ripper, which is a wonderfully redolent drink, perhaps reminiscent of Jack the Ripper's Crimson Harvest.
Yeah, it's really matching to the topic.
That's interesting.
Yes.
That's very interesting. You can taste the port,
Mhm. and the rye. But it's got that nice little bit of additional bitters in the orange in it that gives it that kind of continental kind of flavor as well. I can imagine people from the 19th century drinking a drink like this as well, to kind of be a bit of a meld between an old-fashioned or Manhattan-style drink and claret itself. So I think we're ready for the third reading. Cheers, indeed.
Cheers.
The Royal Confrontation, Chapter 11. The gaslights of Pall Mall cast their yellow glow through the November fog as Andrew Dighton stood before the unmarked door of a building that didn't officially exist. The brass plate beside the entrance bore no name, only a number, 47. Polished to a mirror shine that reflected his own face back at him, distorted and yellowed in the the gaslight. 10 years had passed since that terrible night when he and Caroline had been bundled onto a ship bound for nowhere, and those years showed in the silver threading through his still blonde hair and the deeper lines etched through his Arctic blue eyes. He was 48 now, still powerful but tempered by a decade of living under the sword of Damocles. The November air bit through his greatcoat, carrying with it the mingled scents of coal smoke, horse dung, and the peculiar dampness that was London's alone. This is very evocative.
Yes.
Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled 9 o'clock, its bronze voice muffled by the fog that crept up from the Thames like a living thing. The street was nearly deserted at this hour, only the occasional hansom cab rattling past, its driver hunched against the cold, and the measured tread of constable on his beat, his bullseye lantern swinging rhythmically. "You're certain about this meeting?" Thomas asked from the shadows. His lieutenant had aged too, his face now bearing scars from their years of survival. A white line across his left cheek from a knife in Marseille, a puckered bullet wound at his temple from a close call in Hamburg. His eyes, once bright with youth's optimism, now held the watchful wariness of a man who'd learned that death could come from any quarter. "Could be another trap." "Everything's a trap," Andrew replied, adjusting the pearl stickpin in his cravat, a gift from Caroline on their 20th anniversary, celebrated in exile in a small pension overlooking Lake Geneva. The pearl caught the gaslight, gleaming like a tiny moon. "The question is whether we can spring it without getting caught." Thomas shifted uneasily, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol Andrew knew was concealed beneath his coat. 10 years we've kept our heads down. 10 years of clean business, no troubles with the law. Why now? Why risk it all? Andrew turned to face his old friend, seeing in Thomas's weathered features the reflection of his own journey from London's underworld to reluctant respectability. "Because running forever isn't living, Thomas, and because—" He paused, thinking of Caroline, of the new life growing within her, of the children they already had who deserved better than a life spent looking over their shoulders. "Because some chances are worth taking." The door opened before he could knock, swinging inward on well-oiled hinges. A tall man in servant's livery stood silhouetted against the lamplight within, his face carefully blank. He was perhaps 50, with a ramrod posture of an ex-military man and eyes that missed nothing. His gloved hands were clasped before him in perfect servant's pose, but Andrew noticed the telltale bulge beneath his left armpit, armed then, and not troubling to hide it. Lord Pemberton, the servant intoned, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of the upper servants who truly ran England's great houses, you're expected. Andrew hadn't used that name in years, not since their hasty departure from England in '78, but he showed no surprise. If they knew that alias, they knew everything. Then I mustn't keep them waiting, he said. So one of my first questions, where were they in those 10 years? Because just before that, we had last seen them being captured, being taken out to a boat by the evil Prince Albert Victor. Why didn't he just kill them?
Because actually they were his allies in a way. So they still had some kind of weird relationship, and I don't know which 10 years, because they were actually escaping first to France, and then they changed their later. Then they changed their name. So yeah, I don't want to tell every detail because it's so interesting, and it's so interesting that one family has so many happenings in their lives, and they were so brave to make some really hard decisions. So it's really amazing.
I did want to specifically ask that, because that was one of the things to me that I said that makes no sense. You know, he was this man known for doing these hideous, awful things to women, and we earlier see that he's cornered Caroline. And you know, I appreciate hearing your explanation, because then it starts to make sense. Whereas when I first read it, I thought, you know, is this really true? Because why wouldn't this vicious killer do awful things to her? Why did he let them live for 10 years? So it's good to hear your explanation that they kind of had things on each other, it sounds like.
Yeah, they kind of. And another thing is, don't forget you're talking about a mentally ill someone.
Right.
So you cannot find logic in their things. So
that's true.
That's
and again,
simple. No rationality.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's why I'm so glad that you put that note at the end. How much are you familiar with some of the other theories of who Jack the Ripper was, and how do you think they compare to this version?
Well, I heard that the last one was they found some DNA somewhere. So what I see, and they tried to find out who he was, and then they found a doctor in London who might be Jack the Ripper or whatever. You know, every 10 years someone says that they know who's Jack the Ripper. Actually, I mean this is it has a really big fan club, let's say that, and many Facebook groups which is all organized around this whole Jack the Ripper story. And there are many theories. Every 10 years something big comes out, and in that 10 years many others which don't have any weight. So what I think is everything is possible from my point of view, and as they told me the whole story, it made sense. Everything made sense. So in the other stories I see some gaps, see some absolutely no rational explanations or whatever, or just someone's imagination. So when a family who's keeping the secret for 150 years, and they had the reason to keep this secret, and they finally arrived to that point that, okay, we want to show it to the world, and they tell me every single detail, and I can repeat myself, it makes sense, then I'm like, okay, this must be the true story.
I do find it a very fascinating question. Now, one of our prior guests was Peter Andrew Sacco. Now, we didn't talk about his book, Jill the Ripper, but that is one of the books he's written where some people think that Jack the Ripper was actually a woman. I'm not sure I agree with that. but I don't know enough about it. And an author I talked to a long time ago, I didn't talk to him on this program, only online, but his name is Dale Larner, and his book posits that Vincent van Gogh was Jack the Ripper. And it's
Oh yeah, I
his
heard that.
research is, that one, that's fascinating to me because he actually dug into the train and the boat schedules and found that Vincent van Gogh, according to his book, actually was in London at the time of each of these murders. And when I looked into how many theories there are, I was shocked. I knew about the Queen's, was it the Queen's physician? I knew about a couple others, but there's actually a quite extensive list of people who people think are possibly Jack the Ripper. And the last question that I think we have time for, not the last question I want to ask, this question fascinates me, and I've asked other authors, some stories catch our imagination and last and last. And the Titanic is one. The Civil War is retold in books over and over, not so much our Revolutionary War, and I'm talking about the American Civil War since you're in Transylvania. Jack the Ripper is told over and over and over. Endless books are written. What are we closing in on 200 years later, maybe 175 years later? Jeffrey Dahmer, are you familiar with him?
No, I'm not.
It was a very, very hideous, awful thing that happened in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. What about the 1990s?
Yes.
Where he was kidnapping boys and abusing them in terrible ways, and then he was a cannibal, and it was a hideous, hideous thing. I think maybe I'm glad that we're not writing and talking about him, but Jack the Ripper was hideous too. Why do some of these stories just capture our imagination and for hundreds of years and some don't?
It's a very good question. Probably the whole mystery around Jack the Ripper, that we don't know who he was. We actually didn't know who he was until now. And I see that when I'm posting in those Jack the Ripper clubs or whatever on Facebook, I actually find it fascinating that people don't want to know the truth because it's more interesting. Yeah, because it's more thrilling. It's more interesting that it's a mystery. It's not a mystery anymore, but I still find it really interesting how he organized the whole thing to not get caught ever. It's written in the book. So how he organized it, why he needed Romani helpers, for example. So this whole story by itself, it's amazing. He was an insane idiot, let's say it, and he shouldn't have done that what he did, but I find it a quite interesting story. And with this addition, with these additions, it's even more interesting than by Jack the Ripper itself, because it's related to some people in a really interesting way, and Romani people.
I think it's interesting that it is such a horrible, awful story, and we didn't really get to some of the questions about what he actually did. It's truly horrifying, and yet, yes, for some reason, we as humans have this endless speculation.
Yes. So we have come to the end of our questioning.
Unfortunately.
Yes, but I would like to ask what kind of links you have to your material.
Yeah, we are right now talking to some publishers, so it can be spread in also. I really want to make it in a Hungarian and Romanian translation too, for myself, and also to publish it. So I don't know when the next event will be, but you can find any information on jacktherippers.assassins.co.uk, and there is a detailed timeline about the books, about the stories, some research materials too, and some nice pictures about the family. So I just uploaded some, and it's very detailed, and it makes you more intrigued in the whole story. So and you can find also the books. You can buy the books from there. Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
Are you on any social media?
No, not yet. Not yet. I'm advertising on actually advertising. I'm actually reading some parts, some really short parts, in on TikTok, because I'm not my English reading is not very well. Actually, when
I think your English is great. As I said, I love studying other languages. I'm studying, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many. And
73.
right. And I never get
Thank you.
fluent. So I'm always very impressed with people who are fluent. I could not have a conversation with someone in German, which is probably my strongest language.
So, Laura, what do we have as far as your links and events that may be coming up as well?
You can find us at booksandbrews.net. We're on YouTube, youtube.com/@books and brews spelled out. I am at lauravosica.com. Our sponsor, Gabriel's Horn Press, is gabrielshornpress.com. And you can find the ram who trampled me and all our other wonderful sheep at glenmurrellfarms.wordpress.com.
Excellent. And who do we have coming next month, Laura?
We actually have the next 3 months planned out.
This is awesome.
Yes, but if you put out a call for, I need authors so I can give them totally free publication or
Publicity.
publicity, that's the word. Oh, I must be on my third drink.
There we go. Yes.
Within about 5 minutes, I had 3 authors lined up, and I am excited about them. And every month I say it.
Can't imagine.
Every month I say this every month. I must sound like I'm lying, but I'm not. I genuinely am, because I wouldn't invite them on the program otherwise. Ashley Fontaine, that's actually a pen name, and she writes in multiple genres ranging from mystery thrillers to suspenseful paranormal to dark comedy. She is the recipient of numerous awards for her gritty, no-holds-barred style of writing. Her stories will captivate and pull you inside the lives of her characters and intricate plot lines. And
That's author number 1.
She has actually just finished her, I think, 36th book that she co-wrote with someone writing her first book. And they will both be on our program. So I am excited about that.
Author number 2.
Author number 2, we have coming up probably in November, Jake Needham, who is the author of the ebook Thriller of the Year Award. And so he has, I think, several series of, kind of Jack Reacher type characters.
Oh, very nice.
And then we
Author
have
number 3.
author number 3, Christina Scarpino, and her book is about surviving a terrorist bombing. And so that is more of a memoir rather than fiction, and how that impacted her life and about that day. So some very interesting stories coming up. Cheers.
Cheers.